at some point, again, in the same time frame that we're talking about, Second World War, thereafter, I think the world fell finally into the grip of the banks. It fell finally into the grip of those unelected, unaccountable, for-profit groups for whom everything was only about money and power. And for them, they became anywheres at that point. They didn't care about, didn't care about Britain, didn't care about America. They just cared about money. And I think that has been I think we lost in that slow motion consequence of the 20th century, or the first half of the 20th century, that all of what had been before, that kind of love of country, that kind of patriotism, that kind of identity, I think that was unmoored, unhitched at that point, and something very large and slow moving just began to drift like a great liner that was no longer on its safe anchorage. And it's only now that with our kind of 2020 vision of hindsight that we're able to look back and see that happened.
When was the last time Britain had a leader who believed the country was more important than the banks?
Well, you probably have to go back to pre-1694 and the establishment of the Bank of England. I mean, that's when the Bank of England was set up, and that became the model for the Fed in 1913, and the creature of Jekyll Island, and I think, but then where do you start? The City of London was established by at the time of William the Conqueror,
of course,
and is a state within a state. It's like the Vatican. It's a separate entity. People don't fully appreciate the extent to which the City of London is not Britain. It's a separate. It's even got its own police force. The monarch has to seek permission to enter the City of London. There's a nominated person in Parliament, the city remembrancer, who most people don't notice, who's there all the time to make sure that the unique rights of the City of London are maintained and not compromised by any subsequent legislation. So there's been a long period of that. So to get back to a time before the banks had thrall, you'd have to be before the banks were given, the Bank of England was given that magical power to create fiat money. That's when all the, that's when the trouble started. Do you know about the Bradbury pound? That's the great story. Well, the what do you call it? That Abe Lincoln had, constitutional script, the greenbacks.
Yes.
During the Civil War, obviously, to get himself out of a financial hole. Well, the Bradbury pound came about in 1914 because there was a run on the banks. War was declared, and people panic, and people were going to the banks with their bits of paper, their big banknotes. I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £5, £10, whatever. And in those days, you could actually get that transformed into gold. You could get the commensurate, the relevant bit of gold.
Yeah, it was transferable, had value, and
so the banks had a run on. Now they closed the banks. But there was an extended bank holiday. The bank went scuttling to the Treasury. David Lloyd George was the person they sought out. The Treasury, the government, must have had an inkling that it was happening, because within 3 days, legislation was rushed through Parliament. So they must have had something kind of ready to go. And they created Treasury notes. And the first Lord of the Treasury was a man called, I think it was John Bradbury anyway. And he put his signature was on these notes, and their nickname was the Bradbury Pounds. And so the banks reopened. The people were still queuing up, wanting to transfer their bank notes into gold. They were persuaded to take these Treasury notes instead. And people said, well, what's the value of these? And they were debt-free and interest-free, and they were underwritten by the notional value of Britain. Everything that Britain was or is, its creativity, its people, its labour force, its industry, everything. That's what underwrote the Bradbury pound. And for whatever reason, people accepted it. Okay, I'll take these Bradbury pounds. I'll take these treasury notes, not bank notes, treasury notes, interest-free, debt-free. And that saved the day. The run on the bank was averted. Now, almost at once, the banks said or realised, we can't have this. This is debt-free, interest-free mode of exchange. What's in it for us? And so very quickly, they went back to the government, said, withdraw these Bradbury pounds. Let's go back to the old days. We'll buy government bonds. We'll give you banknotes. We'll call it 3%. 3% interest, sound fair? The Bradbury pounds were, I think the last one actually didn't come out of circulation until maybe in the late, many years later. I can't remember exactly when the last one came out of circulation. Britain's national debt in 1914, before the war, was about £650 million. By 1918, it was 7.5 billion, because the bankers had regained control. But for a moment, with the advent of this debt-free, interest-free treasury note underwritten by the notional or real value of Britain, there was a currency went out into general circulation that could have changed everything. Imagine if the banks had been disempowered because they didn't have the power of debt, they didn't have the power of usury, interest, whatever you want to call it. But they realised, we're not having this. So having been got out of the hole of the run on the gold, the Bradbury pounds were taken away. Nobody noticed. There's a war on, and the national debt that began its cycling upwards.
Could crypto be a Bradbury pound?
Well, I seek to host conversations about Bitcoin and crypto from time to time. I'll make no bones about it. I'm not really sure that I properly. I'm in an expert enough position to say whether I think it's the freedom of humanity or not. I hear very strong voices on either side. People say it's a Ponzi scheme and a con and don't go near it. Other people say, no, this is the foundation upon which we will rebuild society. And somewhere between those two polar extremes must lie the truth. I think there are elements about it. Distributed ledger, blockchain. I think somewhere within there are profound solutions, because I have asked and had a vague yes whether or not you could use the blockchain protocol to have, say, a news channel that couldn't be shut down because it's peer-to-peer. You know, the currency exchange with Bitcoin is peer-to-peer, person-to-person, without the intercedence of a bank. And hypothetically, they say yes, you could distribute information. You could transact. Bitcoin essentially is a transaction of information. So therefore, you could exchange news. You could in that way, and the people couldn't. The baddies couldn't get at it. Hypothetically, so the cryptocurrency or Bitcoin and blockchain interests me for that reason. And although I listen to very strong voices saying don't go anywhere near Bitcoin, it's been hacked, the banks have got control of it, and so on and so on. I think somewhere within that thinking, there might be some of the answer.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. We hope you'll subscribe to it. And by the way, you can hit the little bell on there and get notifications every time we produce a video. We hope you'll do that also.